We tend to think of decline as something loud and destructive, but usually it's entirely silent. A living, breathing organism stops moving, stops growing, and slowly hardens into a monument of what it used to be. This is the specific threat facing modern faith. For many, the weekly gathering has devolved into a spectator sport. You sit in a comfortable chair, consume a well-rehearsed monologue, and go home. You become an audience member rather than an active participant. This diagram compares two biological models to illustrate the problem. On the left, a system pours all its energy into surface area expansion, growing leaves to look healthy from a distance. On the right, a system directs its energy into actual fruit production. A tree covered in leaves but barren of fruit gives the illusion of health, but it produces nothing of value. Going through the motions of religious routine without experiencing any personal transformation creates a dangerous complacency. It is the quiet process of calcification, turning a spiritual movement into a static institution from the inside out. This photograph captures the stark, isolated columns of the Artemis Temple ruins in ancient Sardis. In the 1st century, the church in this city received a harsh diagnosis in the Book of Revelation. They had a stellar reputation. Everyone in the region thought they were thriving. But beneath that polished exterior, they were spiritually dead. They had fallen into the trap of resting on their laurels, mistaking a prestigious reputation for genuine vitality. The response to this lukewarm complacency isn't mild disappointment. The text describes a visceral, physical reaction, a stagnation so deep it induces sickness. The instruction is to wake up and strengthen what little remains before it dies completely. When a spiritual movement surrenders to apathy, the decline is predictable. What starts as a vibrant, active mission slowly turns inward, eventually settling into a comfortable, exclusive club that serves only its own members. To find the historical cure for this kind of religious apathy, we have to travel back to 1st century Jerusalem. The temple was designed as a physical intersection where all nations were meant to encounter God. Instead, it had been partitioned by massive physical barriers, transformed into a profitable marketplace that actively kept people out. This animated flowchart maps the power structure of the Sanhedrin, the ruling religious aristocrats of the time. Following the events of John 11, where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead just 2 miles away, these leaders hold an emergency session. Their primary concern isn't theology, it's loss aversion. They realize that if Jesus continues gaining followers, the Roman authorities will intervene, threatening their political power and social status. To protect their position, they bottlenecked access to the temple. By controlling who could participate and demanding specific financial exchanges, they gatekept the very presence of God. When leaders prioritize their own institutional survival and comfort, the vulnerable and the marginalized are systematically shut out of the central hub of grace. This is why the response to the temple corruption is so violent. Jesus didn't form a committee or hold a seminar. He made a whip, marched into the courtyard, and physically dismantled the economic barriers the gatekeepers had built. The moment the tables are flipped and the elite merchants are driven out, the space opens up. Immediately, the blind, the lame, and the outcasts, the exact people forbidden by the religious elites, flood into the temple to be healed. A house of prayer requires the destruction of religious exclusivity. The comfort of the elite is sacrificed to make room for radical inclusion. That physical building in Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD, but the architecture of how we access God shifted entirely. This diagram illustrates a concept called temple Christology. Watch as the rigid architectural blueprint dissolves and reforms into a network of living human nodes. The theological reality is that the physical building is gone, and the community of believers itself is now the actual temple. Because this network is made of individual people, the responsibility to keep the gates open shifts from a central hierarchy to every person within the community. The system only functions if each node remains active and accessible. This leaves us with a stark historical mirror. We have to ask ourselves whether our lives look more like the disruptive Jesus making room for the broken, or the comfortable gatekeepers protecting their own space. A faith built on chasing emotional goosebumps or accumulating trivial intellectual knowledge is just another form of consumerism. Stepping out of the anonymous crowd means putting that knowledge to work. It requires getting your hands dirty, serving your community, and producing tangible fruit. Apathy doesn't have to be the end of the story. When complacency is shattered, the internal energy is finally released into outward, visible growth. Faith is never meant to be a product you passively consume from a theater seat. It is an urgent, ongoing mission to bring disruptive life into a broken world.